Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is Sunday, October 6th, and today we are talking about Inter Miami's 1-0 victory that came at the death of a 3-point win over Toronto FC. And I've completely lost the plot line, but I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling this afternoon, my man?
You know what, man? Both of us are exhausted, having done more than 10 episodes in 12 days. So I will forgive you on botching up that intro a little bit. But you know what? The listeners didn't care until I mentioned it. So it's fine. I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. The weekend is very short. I wish it was longer. I am definitely pushing for that 3-day weekend at work. But I don't think anyone's listening to me. And Inter Miami always helps me out when they win. So my mood is up and I am in good spirits. What about yourself, my friend?
I'm feeling good. I feel very appreciative of what we saw yesterday. I think that we'll talk a lot about this game, but the fact that we can just go in there and get a 1-0 win and have it end on a very exciting moment, and we have positives and negatives to talk about, and we can just talk about Inter Miami in a relaxed, calm, comfortable way, unlike what we had been doing for the previous weeks when we were a little nervous about the supporter shield, a little nervous about the points record. All of that feels like it's in good shape again. And so, based on 3 points last night, all of those things are on the table. And I think in Inter Miami's world, heading into a 2-week break, we all feel really good about where Inter Miami is. And that's important. And I think that is something I'm very appreciative of. And I'm happy that we're not panicking and we're not going to spend the next 2 weeks talking about how to fix things or what emergencies we need to have or what levers we need to pull or anything like that, because the team has done what they've needed to do to put us in this position to feel comfortable going into the final game of before the playoffs.
Yeah, and this calm and composure is not going to be common by any means. So we should enjoy it while it lasts. And just a little preview for our viewers and listeners. I do have some positive things to say about Tata Martino, which I think in itself reflects how the last couple of days have gone and how this performance yesterday has sort of changed the narrative. I'm not sure if you're on the same page with me on this, but even if we did draw that game yesterday, I would have been a little bit disappointed, but not too much. I think the vibes have been generally very positive and good. So overall, I wouldn't have been too fussed if we ended up in a draw. Yes, waiting 2 weeks for the last game of the season always ends up being much worse when you end on a draw or a loss. But the fact that we have a win, everything seems to be hunky-dory. We didn't pick up any major injuries. All our players now seem to be coming back into good form. So it looks good for Inter Miami overall, and I'm glad that that's happening at the right time.
Beautifully put. There are a couple things I wanted to mention, just sort of small notes. It's sort of winding down in the season. Obviously, the transfer window's closed and all of those types of things are behind us. So it's really just about preparing your best 11 or a really best 16, including your subs, to be able to have an impact in the playoffs and survive in advance. But there are a couple things around Inter Miami's world that I think we should talk about. The first is Coco Jean, who was a member of Inter Miami for about a year and a half, tore his ACL early in the 2023 season. That was the last we saw of him because we had to use our one-time buyout right as the season was about to begin on him in order to get everyone to fit and be compliant for the regular season. And so he was training with the team for a while, coming back from that ACL injury. And so he was around the team. He finally left the team a couple months ago in the summer. We didn't hear anything about him signing with another club, which I thought was confusing, but that finally has happened. He's signed with FC Sochaux, which is a French club. He's obviously French. It's in the second division. And so Coco Jean has found his next stop after his time at Inter Miami concluded.
Yeah, not much to say on that. I just wish him well. It's always good to see Inter Miami players once they leave the club to go to good clubs and just play football, and that's going to be the same for Coco Jean. Hopefully he's recovered well from his injury and is now ready to get back to professional football.
Yeah, and then the other thing is Inter Miami 2, thanks to Yuval Cohen in the 79th minute today against the Carolina Core, sent IMCF 2 to the MLS Next Pro playoffs. Today was decision day for MLS Next Pro, and the team, after being one of the, I think the worst team in MLS Next Pro last year, has made the playoffs. I think they finished in third in the East after today. It looks like, 48 points after 28 games. So good, solid season from them. I think I have a lot of questions about the B team that I would love to talk and have answered by someone that watches them on a more consistent basis and maybe is more tuned into them. Not a ton of prospects at that level that I think are going to jump up and impact Inter Miami next year. Ryan Carmichael, college graduate, has been sort of their number 9. Asante Morales, a guy that is signed to a first-team contract, plays for there a lot. Gio Farena, a guy we brought in from Argentina, from Boca Juniors earlier this year. But a lot of the other more interesting prospects, Israel Boatwright has not played a ton for them. Brian Destin has not played a ton for them. So I'd be curious to see what happened to those guys. Jack Pym, who I know is a younger player, also didn't play a ton for them this year. So I'd be curious to get those questions answered. But ultimately, the team is significantly more successful than they were a year ago. And so it's part of the Inter Miami sphere. Bravo to them and kudos. And hopefully they have a good run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of players come in from the academy this season, a lot of breakthrough stars overall. I know we were talking about who's actually going to be that breakthrough star when we do post-season awards and stuff. But hopefully that tradition continues into next season as well. As you mentioned, there may not be as many prolific names in the Inter Miami 2 lineup, but you never know. We might get a couple of surprises. I am excited to see a couple of them. Ryan Carmichael, you mentioned, Israel Boatwright, maybe if he gets more opportunities, and Gio Farena as well. We know we want some defenders in that space. So it'll be interesting to see which one can make that jump into the first team squad, but that's for next season. Good luck to them in the playoffs. We're all going to be rooting for them through and through.
Yes, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the international call-ups. Of course, Inter Miami is going to take the next 2 weeks off because of the October international break. They do have 5 players that are going to join their national teams, 4 at the senior level, and then Benjamin Kramaski is going to join the U.S. U20 team. He's the star of that team. He's the most experienced player. He's going to be the leader of that team by the looks of it. So I think that'll be a cool experience for him. He was obviously the youngest player for the Olympic team, still eligible for the U20 World Cup, which is next year, I believe. And so he could be like the cornerstone piece of that team. And I think that would be a cool experience for him, considering how his role is much different at Inter Miami. David Ruiz back with Honduras. He's becoming sort of a locked-in player for them. Diego Gomez also becoming a locked-in player for Paraguay. And then, of course, Lionel Messi has been locked in for Argentina as long as he's healthy. He did miss the last window because of that injury, so I'm sure Argentina fans will be happy to have him. But the big one is Leo Campana, who has missed a long time, was once a very bright prospect for Ecuador, still is, but is now sort of growing into the prime of his career. He was at one point with Wolves and Grasshoppers and in Switzerland. And so for him to sort of get this call back, I think is really nice for him. He obviously knew going into the game last night that he was going to get this. And so has confidence, comes in, makes a big play. Love to see that. And I'm sure he will come back to Inter Miami in 2 weeks or a week and a half with a ton of confidence. So happy for him.
Yeah, that last goal yesterday would do him a world of favor going into the international break. He's going to be brimming with confidence. And yeah, he had a good performance yesterday. I thought he took his finish really, really well. And when he got the chances, he delivered. Ecuador, I can definitely see doing with Campana. They need him. He's a very good player, and I'm sure he's going to be good for them if he's given the opportunity. I'm actually really excited to see some of these players on international duty. We need to do a prayer circle to make sure nobody gets injured, but it's going to be good for them to keep their fitness levels up, make sure they're sharp, and I think when they come back, they're going to be all ready to go for the playoff games. So I'm excited to see how these players perform.
Yeah, and listen, last year at this time, we had like 13 players go to international duty, and some of our key players, Campana and Jose Martinez, like guys that were really important to what we were doing, Kamal Miller, were sort of leaving the team for these breaks. Now it's really just Messi and Diego Gomez and some of the younger midfielders. Luis Suarez retired from the national team. And so that hasn't been as big of an issue this year. Even during the Copa America, we were able to ride that storm better than a lot of teams. And so it's always nice to not have that pressure of if something goes wrong here, we could be in a lot of trouble. Anything else before we get in the game that's sort of on your mind or happening?
No, I think we're ready to delve into the game.
Okay, so Inter Miami, 10 rotations. They go back to this 3-4-3, which they were employing a lot during the final few weeks pre-Messi's return. And with Messi coming off the bench, they go back to it. A back three of Toto Aviles, Kryvstov, and Noah Allen. Noah Allen being the one returning starter. Negri and Gressel play as those wingbacks, David Ruiz and Kremaski in the middle, and then Robert Taylor, Matias Rojas, and Leo Campana, Captain Campana, up top, with Oscar Ustari making his debut. Now that we've seen this lineup in action, I think that there were some obvious concerns we should have had before the game, or things that we probably should have talked about. I think we both went into that game with a lot of confidence, mostly because we didn't think Toronto was going to be able to put together the type of performance that was going to put us on the back heels. But also, I think we found there was a lot of fundamental issues with this 11 that led to us struggling to create a ton of opportunities, and it did feel like it played out that way.
Yeah, I think we were a lot more optimistic, and sometimes Inter Miami can do that to you. You forget how good this team actually is, and then when we do make changes, we continue to expect those same level of performances. But then we also forget that the MLS is the MLS, and playing away from home is not difficult. Is not easy. And playing away from home is, you tend to drop points. Every team does that, whether you're the best team in the MLS or whether you're a mid-tier team. And yesterday's performance, I thought, reflected that some of these players have not played enough. They were not sharp enough at certain points. The chemistry was a little bit lacking. The sharpness was missing for sure. And we just didn't have any flow or rhythm to the game. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that some of these players were being forced to play a style of football, a system that they weren't necessarily comfortable in, or they haven't played much of. If they had played this 3-4-3 previously over a couple of weeks and had the opportunity to drill that in game, then I think it would have looked a lot better. But it just felt like there were a couple of pieces in that lineup that didn't necessarily fit the system, and that sort of lended itself to the lack of fluidity and flow in game. That being said, I wasn't too disappointed with how we performed. I thought we played well enough. Toronto looked fine in certain moments. They had some dangerous plays here and there, but it never looked like we were like under the cosh or in trouble. And I felt like once the changes came on, we picked up the pace a little bit and obviously looked a lot better when we had our superstars on the pitch. But overall, slightly disappointed that some of our players who started this game didn't get the opportunity to perform that well, but we still got the result, so that's always great.
Are we ready for awards now?
Yes, we're ready for awards now. We're ready.
No,
for
first,
awards.
Let's get into the recap. The game starts, and then in the 93rd minute, Campana wins the ball. It lands at the feet of Diego Gomez. He pushes it to Suarez. It goes back to Campana, back to Suarez, back to Campana, who catches it and then slams it home on the second touch for the winner. I joke as that's the one moment that really happened in this game. There was, of course, a few others that maybe we'll poke into, but it did feel like this was a game that was played in between the 18-yard boxes. Not a big threat on goal. Toronto, I thought, was a little bit better in terms of creating half chances, but they didn't really have the quality to convert those into goals. And so I kind of fast forward to the 93rd minute because that's when the action really started and ended. And so should we just talk about how beautiful that whole play was? Because Campana wins the ball, passes out to Suarez, and then receives it back, slams it home. Suarez on the left wing. We can talk about that, but
I think it was Yannick Bright
minute.
who won the ball and passed it into Campana. Was it Campana who won the ball?
Yeah. I know that was my one takeaway from that play that I don't remember from the first watch. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that was one of the few moments during that game where we had a penetrative run and a penetrative pass, and we tried to actually be a lot more vertical than we were being previously in the other 90 minutes of the game. And it led to a goal. I thought that was beautifully constructed, and a lot of it was just Campana and Suarez being on the same page. Suarez playing on that left side caught me by surprise, and he continued to stay there. I thought it would be a drifting role, but he continued to stay on that side of the pitch for large parts of the final 10 minutes of the game. And I thought when Campana passed the ball up in, like, popped it into him, I thought it was a little bit slow, could have been slightly better to create that speedy attack. But Suarez, man, first time volley straight into Campana's knee. He bops it up with his thigh and then straight into the corner. Beautiful finish, beautiful pass, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I joke about that being the start of action, but Toronto was probably the more dangerous team in the first half. Inter Miami didn't really get much going. They did have one moment where Benjamin Kremeski sort of releases Robert Taylor down that left side, but that was really it. And the defender sort of recovered well. And then in the second half, once the subs came in, it started to kick into gear a little bit. Messi being the first sub was, I think, the most impactful. Suarez and Yannick Bright come in around the 71st, 72nd minute. And like you said, Suarez goes to that left side. Yannick Bright comes into the middle and was partnering with Busquets. I thought that was an intriguing talking point, seeing those two together. I thought when we first brought in the subs, we sort of lost our shape. Matías Rojas sort of started coming centrally. And
I can give you the breakdown of what the shape looks like, because I had to replay every moment twice to figure out where everyone is. So when Messi came on, you're right, the shape completely changed. It went down to a 3-5-2 with Messi and Campana playing out top, and then Matías Rojas coming in centrally with 5-man midfield and 3-man backline. Or you can call it a 4-4-2 with a 4-man backline, Aviles playing as the right back.
Can I give it to you even funkier? Because I had it as a 3-5-1-1.
Yeah. I mean, yes. 3-5-1 with Messi being Messi and just drifting around. So I'm glad we saw the same thing. We were on the same page with that. Then when Suarez came into the picture, I thought it became into a 3-4-3 with Suarez, Campana, and Messi up top. Again, Messi doing that drifting role, but with the 4-man midfield. And then when Gomez was brought on towards the end, I thought it shifted into a 4-3-3 with Gomez playing as the 3-man midfield and Aviles, Allen, Kryvstov, and Negri playing that 4-man backline. And I thought that's why we looked so good towards the end of the game and got that goal, because we had a 3-man midfield, which is exactly what we needed this entire game.
Yeah, and the fact that we were trying things, I was okay. I'm okay with, especially in a game like this where the result doesn't really matter. I'm happy we got to see it and we can put it away. But like you said, I think once we brought in the second and third set of subs, we found a little bit more structure that helped us play a little bit better and set the guys up for a little bit more success. And then I think that's why it was important to have Suarez stay to the left, because there was a 10-minute period where we were really dysfunctional, just discombobulated on where we were supposed to be. And there was just a real lack of structure in the central part of the park. And so I'm sure Tata, when he was bringing Suarez on to fix that as part of the substitution window that would change that, said, I need you to be on that left side just to give us a little bit of structure, because right now it is chaos. There are a few other moments from this game that we could bring up, but I feel like we're going to bring them up when we get to awards. So I feel like we can kind of move on from the recap now and just talk a little bit about Toronto and how this game unfolded in terms of the tactical battle. But was there another moment that you felt like we had to stop and talk about?
No, I think nothing stood out as such. Again, Toronto's moments themselves were half moments. So they created opportunities, but they never were clear-cut chances. I'm looking at the stats now, and in terms of opportunities created, I think it was quite similar, right? The statistics are 15 shots to 4 shots. Okay, that's not similar at all. But again, it looked similar, because that's how it felt like. It never felt like Toronto was actually threatening us at any point during the game, except a few penetrative runs that they had.
I think there was a lack of quality from Toronto that made it very unintimidating. So that
Yeah,
even that
yeah.
they were able to get the ball into half chances. I specifically remember one Derek Etienne opportunity that Oscar Ustari
Where
had
he
to make a nice
rinsed,
save on.
yeah, where
Uh,
he rinsed Aviles.
yeah, he ended up no, not that one, but earlier in the game. But he ended up being offsides, and it's just like they're making runs too quick, and the back three played well. Noah Allen played well. There was another moment that I was saving for when we talk about Noah Allen. I think in the 72nd minute where Prince Owusu sort of cuts in on his left foot, and Noah Allen has to make a sliding tackle. That was really nice. He's pumping his fist, and I was disappointed that the rest of the defense wasn't hyping him up too, because it was a really nice play. So there were other moments that I think had an impact on this game, but again, Toronto just never looked threatening. They tried to bring on some different offensive players in the second half, but aside from Lorenzo Insigne, who was banged up, no one really, was a scary player. And even if they did get a couple shots off, it wasn't like an intimidating way. They didn't really have any shots that forced Ustari to make a big save or anything like that. So, yeah, just not a threatening team from Toronto, which makes sense, by the way. I forgot this, but I was reminded of this over the last 24 hours. They were awful last year, and they have mostly the same team. They were the worst team in the MLS. As bad as Inter Miami was last year, Toronto was worse. And so when you think about it like that, and you don't have Messi coming in to attract all these talents at undervalued prices and great contracts, and you don't have Chris Henderson drafting players like Yannick Bright, you don't have a youth academy producing players like Kramaski and Ruiz and Ian Frey and Noah Allen, it's really hard to turn everything around in one season. And so
You end
for
up like
them,
Toronto.
right. And so when you think about it from that lens, Toronto has the superstars, but the rest of the infrastructure is really weak around it. They're trying to make steps in the right direction. I think they got the right coach. They have gotten those superstars to be on the same page this year, which was not the case under Bob Bradley in previous years. And so I actually think this season, which is over for them, was a step in the right direction. And again, you give them another transfer window, they can build out sort of the depth of their roster a little bit better, and they will be a better team. Yesterday afternoon, they did not have Bernadeschi available. Insigne was only available off the bench because he was banged up. And so for them, it's just sort of a whimper out, but positive steps in the right direction. And we talked about how they were going to be eliminated if they didn't win. They didn't even bother to survive until decision day. They were eliminated last night. DC, I think, passed them up. And so Toronto played their final minutes, and the final moment was Campana sending their season home and away. So tough finish for Toronto, but good things for them moving forward, hopefully.
And there's something to be said about the MLS when so many teams, when they lose their star players, the drop in quality is immense. And yesterday, if they had Bernadeschi and Insigne on the pitch, if they had Kevin Long in that back line, they may have looked a little bit better. Osorio may have been able to play in that midfield, and things might have been completely different. The game might have been completely different. And that's what happens. And it's the same with clubs like Cincinnati, where when Lucio Costa doesn't play, they look much worse than they actually do when he's on the pitch. So I think it's a testament to Inter Miami's depth and strength that even when our star players are not on the pitch, we are still able to get those results. And I know I'm linking it back to Inter Miami, but at the end of the day, that's our club, and we should be happy with the way it's been constructed. But Toronto did what they tried to do what they wanted to do in terms of getting a result yesterday. A draw would have been slightly more favorable for them, but even then, I thought that dagger at the end with Campana shooting that beautiful volley into the corner of the goal was the end of their season. And yeah, I wish them the well. I wish them well over the course of the off season, and maybe they build up and come back again.
I do want to say before we move on, because I think this will come back up, I thought Richie Larea and Shane O'Neill on the right side for them, Shane O'Neill being their right-sided center back and Richie Larea played as that right wing back. I thought those were the two best players for them, and it will be relevant when we get to awards. And so I'm just going to put that out there now.
I also think Gomez was really good for them on the left-hand side. He's the center back, and he had some couple of really good dribbles up into the final third that didn't lead to anything, but I thought he looked impressive, very big. So
in possession.
Yeah.
And then I want to give them also one last bit of credit, because in that first half, they did a really good job of keeping possession, but more so having the game be played on Inter Miami's half of the field. Inter Miami with a ton of rotation and coming off the high of winning in Columbus. And, there's a myriad number of excuses, but we didn't feel like we were going out there to try and dominate that game. And Toronto took advantage of that, kept us sort of on the back heel in that first half. And they did a good job of not really providing us with opportunities to get forward for much of this game, especially the first 60 minutes until we started bringing on the quality that they just couldn't really compete with. So again, kudos to them for losing and being kicked out of their season, but
playing decent enough. Yeah. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't the 7-2 that you called for. So
I did expect a big result for Inter Miami, and maybe we can transition this to why that didn't happen. Mostly I thought it was going to be a big result for Inter Miami because I didn't think Toronto had a lot to offer. And I think that played out, where even though they played well, they weren't particularly dangerous. But I did expect Inter Miami to do more going forward. I expected that front line, and I expected that first 11 to really put some offense together in a way that they just didn't. There's a lot of talent on the field. Robert Taylor, Julian Gressel, Matthijs Rojas, 3 guys that are MLS All-Star caliber players. Julian Gressel has been an All-Star in this league, and I don't think anyone would doubt that Rojas or Robert Taylor, if they were the star of their team, could get to that level as well. They should have been able to do more going forward on paper, but I think there was a lot of reasons why they couldn't really get going, and Saur will tell you about all of those right now.
You know how many passes we had this game?
How many?
625, I think. Of those passes, our midfielders, being Benjamin Kramaski and David Ruiz, both had about 40 completed passes. And that's about it. The majority of our passes came from our back line. I think Aviles had some 89 passes or attempted passes, which is way more, 83 passes from Aviles. Noah Allen had some 93 pass attempts. So the majority of the game was being played in that section of the pitch. We didn't have any penetration coming in from our midfield. No offensive mindset from any of our midfielders. I thought Gressel and Rojas would actually provide that creative energy and that outlet. Gressel was absolutely absent. That 2-man midfield that we've become so accustomed to under Tata Martino does not fit in these scenarios, especially when you want to dominate the ball and you want to dominate in terms of creating those chances, because both Kramaski and Ruiz are not they are offensive-minded players, but they're not creators. They're not the ones who can keep the ball moving. They're not the ones who will dictate the tempo and the flow of the game in the midfield. And what that did was there was a lack of rhythm. There was a lack of composure and calmness on the ball when we were playing. And I think the game plan was quite clear. We want to get in behind Toronto's backline. And in doing so, we were launching the ball forward very often from the deep. That's why you saw balls coming in from Ustari. You saw balls going in from Serhiy Kryvstov into Campana, into Robert Taylor sometimes. And I thought Campana's hold-up play for a majority of the game was quite poor, but we were also quite poor in winning those second balls. And that's when Kramaski and Ruiz should be criticized, because it's their responsibility to win those second balls when we lose out on the long ball. If those second balls came through for us, we may have been able to create more opportunities. I thought we saw a couple of glimpses of that when the ball went to Robert Taylor after it fell in the midfield. And I think Kramaski passed it into him. But overall, there was just no penetration, no verticality in this game. And a lot of the game was played in that midfield. And Toronto was doing most of the attacking when it came with the ball. We were just launching it forward and hoping it sticks. But that tactic didn't work out for us yesterday.
Yeah, and I think it's fair, or I think it's imperative that we are critical of the performances in so much as we have been critical of similar performances in the past. The roles that Kramaski and David Ruiz had are what Yannick Bright and Federico Redondo have done over the past 2 months. And that role puts a ton of pressure and burden for ball progression on especially one of those two midfielders, which has typically been Redondo. And we have been critical of Redondo for not succeeding in that role or fulfilling those obligations as well as maybe we would have liked, or as well as we would have wanted for the system to really shine. And so that was David Ruiz's responsibility in that game, was to sort of come back, get on the ball, and try and get things going forward. Cremaschi more of the interlink, played a little bit ahead, especially in the early parts of this game as we were set up. And David Ruiz didn't do that a ton. And so I don't want to let that go because, again, we talk about it with Redondo when he doesn't have a good game all the time. So the same can be said for David Ruiz. There are a lot of mitigating circumstances, and part of why I'm probably a little bit more critical of Redondo is because he's doing it every single game and he's being consistently put out there. And also that's what we're going to do in the playoffs. We're not going to give David Ruiz that responsibility as we head into the playoffs or going up against the biggest teams. So from that perspective, I think I'm okay with it, but that's where things really broke down compared to what we normally see. And then also we normally see a lot of ball advancement from the wing play. And we didn't really get that with either Franco Negri or Julian Gressel, where we do get that a lot from particularly Jordi Alba, but to a lesser extent, Cello Weekend. And then when Ian Frey plays, we get that from him as well. So all of that was missing. The four most important ball progressors in this lineup really struggled to do that. And that's why we were consistently on the sort of back foot in our own half. When we did get forward, it was sort of long balls that we were able to get one guy on the end of and try and create something out of it. But it wasn't really a sustained buildup. It wasn't expansive. And it's because our four players most responsible for that buildup were not really providing what we needed. And I even add Matthias Rojas as a guy who could have and probably should have come into the midfield to try and, be a part of this. But none of these guys are starters, right? So
yeah, but you also don't want to let them off the hook in the sense that just because they're not starters, they shouldn't be off the hook for not performing when they need to. Of course, there was a game plan in mind and it didn't work out to the T. You can make the case about having some wrong personnel in there. Like Franco Negri does not go forward as a left back. That's not his game. That's not what he does. So to expect him to do that to the same degree as Jordi Alba would be a disservice to him in his game. Julian Gressel on the other side, I thought should have taken up a little bit more responsibility of being that offensive outlet on the right-hand side of the pitch. But again, him and Rojas sort of got lost throughout the game. And there's also a matter of chemistry. I'm not sure how many times these players have played together at the same time. So maybe that's something that you can excuse them for. But overall, I just thought we needed that one extra offensive build-up player, whether that's Sergio Busquets, whether that's Lionel Messi. Because you saw immediately, as soon as Messi came on, Matthias Rojas looked completely different. His link-up play became a lot better. His combinations became a lot better. So maybe he should have tried doing that with Benjamin Cremaschi. Maybe it didn't work out between them. They weren't on the right page. But also the plans didn't seem to be to play through the middle. It felt like we were trying to go long and then try and create those chances off the second balls and counter-pressing. But it's fine. Sometimes these things happen. It was a good run out for a lot of these players. A lot of them haven't had that many minutes in their legs recently. I was most, I think, disappointed in Robert Taylor for not getting the service and also not, I think, making himself available in the same way that he should have. I felt this would have been a great game for him to put a stamp on and stake a claim for that left wing spot. Just didn't work out. And then Matthias Rojas as well, I was a little bit disappointed because I think he's one of the senior most creators, offensive players in this team. And he should have been that guiding force in the middle of the park. He should have drifted in centrally to help out Benjamin Cremaschi and David Ruiz.
And let's also be fair, because if you put the starting 11 out there and you drop any one of these players in, they would have had a better performance because everyone else would have been in tune and in form and well rested and all of those things. And so when you have 10 new players or really 11 new players, that makes it extra difficult because if someone doesn't quite have it, they don't have anyone they can sort of rely on to do what they need to do in order to let the original player sort of work their way into the game. I felt like that was the case with a lot of our guys. We've already mentioned them, but I'll add Negri, I'll add Robert Taylor, and I felt just that they all needed someone to just take over to allow them to find themselves in this game. But because everyone was sort of rotated in, no one was really in a position to do that. So
it's interesting you say that, because yesterday's pre-game show, I mentioned that maybe not having someone like Messi or Busquets would stop them from being deferential, and then someone can actually take the game by the scruff of their necks, like I love to say, and would take that opportunity and be that senior player to be like, okay, you know what, guys, we don't have our main players in the pitch, so we're going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the ball and do it. And yeah, nobody emerged as that one player who would take responsibility, which was a little bit concerning. But again, I don't want to delve too much into the criticism of this. It's fine. It happens. A lot of these players are coming out playing, starting from the first whistle after a very long time. So sometimes it just takes time.
And I also think part of this was, if this was a home game, I think I would have expected more from them to be able to feed off the crowd, to be able to put a little nerves into the opposition and really have sort of sustained possession higher up the field. But you're on the road. The field's not great. It's cold. And you know that some guys, big names are coming in the second half to alleviate anything that you might do wrong. Like, it's just a situation that you would expect a sort of lackadaisical performance. And I think we got that from a lot of players when you would have hoped it would have only been like 2 or 3, but it is what it is.
Yep. And it's Canada, man. Nobody plays well in Canada.
Well, speaking of Canada, Inter Miami does win at Toronto. Something that we've talked about a lot is this Canadian sweep. Unfortunately, Inter Miami does not become the first team to do it, but still nothing to snooze at. The Inter Miami has won away at all 3 Canadian teams in the same season. We beat Montreal on the road earlier this year. A couple weeks later, we beat Vancouver on the road with a nice performance from Campana and Robert Taylor. And then, of course, yesterday afternoon, Campana gets the dagger in the 93rd minute to push Inter Miami to 3 wins and 3 in a different country. We won't count Mexico.
Yeah, that wasn't a good outing for us, that's for sure. But hey, the Canadian sweep is ours. We earned that badge, the little jewel in the crown, as we've so often alluded to. I think it's more of a Drive Pink dialogue personal achievement than it is an Inter Miami personal achievement. I don't know if that was on the mind of the players, but it's a good thing to do. Another thing that we can say we've done this season. And now we have that one last awe-inspiring historical moment that is the points record. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it by the end of the podcast.
Well, let's talk about it now, because Inter Miami, because Campana gets that late winner, we get 3 points instead of 1. That brings us up to 71 points on the season. I think I saw that it made us the 4th team in MLS history to reach 70 points in a single season. So as we inch closer to whatever history we're going to make, that is a real achievement. Only 4 teams in MLS history have done that. And of course, it also keeps us alive for the points record. In 2021, the New England Revolution were able to accumulate 73 points on their way to the Supporter Shield. And Inter Miami with 71 is going to have a chance to break that record against that team in 2024. We're still 13 days away from that as of recording, but it is a little poetic that we will have the chance to break the record against the team that owns the record, which is, again, a team. It only happened 3 years ago. There's a lot of players on that New England Revolution team that were there when they broke the points record. Carlos Gil, the star of that team, was the star of that Supporter Shield winning team. And so, poetic, or is this sort of off your mind now?
No, I think it's very poetic. Taking it to the current holders, it's like, you're challenging them outright, and they will also have it on their minds that, listen, we have this one record. Our season may not have been great, but at least we could defend this. And by not letting Inter Miami win, we can preserve our record for another season. And whoever came up with the schedule, with the match schedule, must be given a pay rise, because that's going to be box office next in 13 days. I'm really excited for that. And that's why I texted you offline as well when I realized that, we're playing New England. They're the ones who hold the record. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they approach this game, because I don't think if I'm New England, I don't want to make it easy for Miami to get the 3 points, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and especially against some of those players. That game will be at Chase Stadium. Inter Miami will be playing a semblance of their best 11 as a tune-up for the playoffs. They're going to be able to watch the 8-9 game in the following midweek, so they'll get a week off. But that's their last tune-up game, and it will be for the points record, and it's something Tata Martino has said he really wants. And I'm sure even if they don't admit it, it's something a lot of the Inter Miami players also want. So this keeps us alive. And it felt like for 91 minutes, we probably weren't going to keep it alive. And so to have that is awesome. And I think that's probably the best thing we could say about this game and performance is that, again, this season, we've relied on everyone on the roster to help make what we've done so far possible. And this was just another example of that, of guys coming off in rotation, off the bench, getting starts that haven't played a ton of minutes, and still getting done what needed to get done for us to be in a position to break that points record. So all good things, right?
Yeah, and also grinding out wins. We've actually dug ourselves out of holes a fair few times this season, and those 1-0 wins, those 2-1 wins, those 3-2 wins where we score those last-minute goals. Philadelphia comes to mind. I think, was it the Montreal game where we won 3-2, where we had to come back from behind again. Yesterday, we also had to win 1-0 towards the end of the game. All of these are really character-building wins, and it really helps the morale in the squad because, again, the feeling completely changes. As soon as that ball went to the back of the net, the point record was back on, and it just completely lifts the mood. And I really believe these are the kind of victories that define champions. So hopefully, come playoffs, we can grind to more victories like these when we're in trouble.
I will say, I think if Inter Miami is able to break the points record, it will be a significantly more impressive achievement compared to what the New England Revolution did in 2021. For those that don't remember, in 2021, we were still dealing with COVID restrictions or policies, and part of that was in the scheduling. And so they ended up playing a lot of the same teams in their little bubble. And so there were some teams that weren't quite as good that they normally would have played twice. They ended up getting to play them 4 or 5 times. And I think that helped them accumulate some points against some bad teams. That said, if Inter Miami draws, they will tie LAFC for the second best record of all time, which they set in 2019 with 72 points. So go get the win. But if you can, it would be, I think, one of the most impressive achievements ever. Probably if that happens, and depending on how the last few games or 2 months of the season go, we'll probably do an off-season episode talking about whether this is the best team in MLS history. And these are the type of factors that we'll be keeping in mind when we have that discussion. But Inter Miami still has to earn that as we head into the playoffs.
If all goes well, I believe that podcast is going to be very, very short. So I'm not going to have too much analysis on there. I know my answer if that goes well.
We might have to bring on someone to argue against us to keep us sane, but we'll see. Okay, are you ready to go for awards?
Yes, bring it on.
Okay.
I got some good ones today, by the way.
I'm looking forward to them. On this show, we give out 6 awards: an Inter Miami Man of the Match, a Heron that flew north, and 2 individual awards each. And since I went first for our huge, important, must-win Supporter Shield clinching game on Wednesday, you get to go first this time. So tell me, Saur, who is Inter Miami's Man of the Match for this game?
The one, the only, the now senior most player on that pitch yesterday, Noah Allen. Absolutely wild performance. I thought he was one of the players who it felt like, yes, he's been playing for the last 5-6 games, because he did look ready for the game, very sharp, in-game state. His flow, his rhythm was very, very good. And he was just on it, plugging every single gap. And I'm going to bring up the point that you mentioned earlier about Richie Larea and their other defender, I forget his name. They were very, very offensive-minded on that side, and they were creating a lot of opportunities on that side of the pitch where Noah Allen was, the left-hand side. And it could have easily been a much been a completely different game if Noah Allen didn't step in a fair few times where he did. His recovery runs, his positioning, his ability to track the runners, and just his overall physicality of the game was, I think, spot on. Brilliant performance, very impressive. And I think the best metaphor for that, or the personification of that, was the tackle that he made on Owusu, which was him almost being one-on-one against Ustari, and Noah Allen just putting his body on the line to get that block and completely disengaging that chance. I thought he had a really, really good game and deserves to be man of the match.
No, I thought so too. And I thought for the first half an hour, 45 minutes, he was everywhere, defensively, which you don't see a ton, but when you do, it really stands out. And he was everywhere in that first 25 minutes. And then in the last 20 minutes, I thought he also had a number of really nice plays, including that 73rd minute block that you mentioned on Prince Owusu. So really, really good game, absolutely deserving of this award and deserving of maybe even a larger conversation about where he fits on the pecking order, because it has felt for so long like he's there if we sort of run low on options, but he has certainly passed Kryvstov on the depth chart. And I wonder how high he can really grow over the next couple of weeks as we enter the playoffs. But we're expecting to get David Martinez back for the next game. So I don't know if he'll get a chance to start, but he has certainly earned it if he does, because he has not just put together one great game against Toronto, but he has put together a number of great games. I thought in this one, you saw the fight, you saw the spirit, you saw the athleticism, you saw the instincts, you saw the ability to get to where he needed to be. And that takes sort of the reps and experience and mental acuity to awareness to be in the right position. And he was doing those little things. So he's just improved so much this year as a center back, and he deserves this man of the match. And it's his first one of the year, according to the Driving Dialogue.
Yeah, and his IQ, I think, stood out. His mentality stood out. He's just become a lot more mature. And with that, I think you can see the confidence with which he's playing, because he's just fearless right now. And I'm really enjoying seeing what Noah Allen is doing on that pitch. I think we're going to revert back to a back four once David Martinez comes back. And
I agree.
I think he's going to pair with Aviles. So that might be a little bit of an issue in terms of accommodating Allen in here into the team. But what this does is, with these performances, consistency that he's showing to this coaching staff, to the fans, what it does is, if he's called upon, if we need to bring him on, if there's an injury, if there's a red card, if there's some issue in the game that he needs to be brought on, there's not going to be doubts about his performance or ability to hold on to his position and do well, because he's proven that he can actually perform well both as a left center back and even maybe as a center back. So I am very impressed with him, of how he's developed this entire season, and hopefully he can take this form into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I think he can play as in a back too. That was part of what we've seen over the last couple
I
weeks.
think he can play in a back too. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be Aviles and Martinez in a back four, but we'll see. We'll see. But he has certainly raised his profile in the eyes of not just Tata Martino, but Inter Miami fans. And so great to see from an academy kid. Okay, our next award, as always, is the Heron That Flew North. And this is our award for the player doing the wrong thing. Florida Herons do not fly north for the winter. They don't fly anywhere for the winter. So if you catch one flying north, you know they're doing the wrong thing. And for this game, I'm going to have to give that to Matthias Rojas. I thought we talked about how all four of the ball progressors, Negri, Kramaski, Ruiz, and Julian Gressel, didn't really shine in that role. But I expected Rojas to be the star of this team, and he didn't deliver in that regard. We've talked about how, and one of the sort of storylines of his season is that when he's asked to be the man, it doesn't really come off for him. But when he's asked to sort of fit in around Messi and Suarez and Busquets, he plays really, really well. There's a big role for him for the rest of this season, but I was hoping we were going to finally see him be the man, and it just didn't really come off. So I'm giving him the Heron That Flew North.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would have given the award to him, but that's definitely justifiable. He was one of a few poor performances on the pitch yesterday. I agree with you. Matthias Rojas is that one player who you expect to create those opportunities, to create those line-breaking passes, those decisive final third passes that could lead to opportunities. And he just didn't have much to offer yesterday until Messi came on the pitch. And it just goes to show, as soon as Messi and Busquets were on the pitch, you could see Rojas was a completely different player. His link-up play and his combinations were very different. And I think that's one lesson that we need to learn as a fan base, that Matthias Rojas is more of a combinations player who's going to play off with someone else who can do that 1-2 back and forth rather than take the game by himself and be the master in the middle of the park. I think he can develop that as a player. He definitely has the skill set to do it. But as of now, he hasn't showcased that. And yesterday, you would say he was more culpable than the rest of them because the responsibility and the onus lies in him as the creative outlet. So I agree with you. Not a great game, but he showed me glimpses of what the issues were. And that's very simple. Once Messi came on, he had somebody to play with.
Yeah. In the broadcast, they mentioned, and I thought Maurice Adu said John Herdman said this, but it was actually Diego Valeri, a longtime MLS midfielder for Portland, very good player, that Matthias Rojas is like a DP that they got for not DP, and it's only something Inter Miami could do. And I don't think he's a DP because he can't control and dominate games, even though he has the technical ability and obviously the left foot to have a huge impact in games. He just doesn't feel like he can grab the reins and be the man. Now, listen, he suffers from a lot of the same things that everyone else did that we talked about. Everyone's rotated in, and so everyone's sort of out of sorts. There's not a ton of chemistry built in. Like, all of that is true, but this has been now something we've seen a lot from him, where if you ask him to be the guy, I'm thinking about at Orlando City earlier this year, he just doesn't really step into that role, despite, like you mentioned, he has the technical ability. He's really good at dribbling the ball. He's really good in tight spaces. And then, of course, he can really put his foot through it and fire from a lot of different spots. So he has the tools, but he's 29. So I don't know if developing into that player is really what we would expect. But so yeah, Heron that flew north for me.
Yeah, and just to go back to a point that you mentioned, that he doesn't take the game and control the game when he's playing. But it's so interesting that when we need to change the game, he's the player that we bring on from the bench, because he has shown that ability to be able to affect the game when he's brought off the bench. So that's just a really interesting juxtaposition. And yeah, it's player to player as well. So I can understand.
I think some might say that in this game, he struggled to grab the game by the scruff of the neck. I don't know if I would say that, but some would. Yeah. Let's hear your first award.
My first award is the Cold Wet Tuesday in Sunderland award.
Okay, Sunderland is a place in England.
It is. You're very right.
In England, it rains a lot. It's in the north of England, if I'm not mistaken. So the weather's probably really bad. A cold, wet Tuesday in Sunderland. It sounds miserable. So
do you know the saying a cold, wet? Game. No, do you know the saying a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke City?
Nope.
Okay, so in the Premier League, it's a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke. Means that if you can perform on a cold, wet night in Stoke, you can perform anywhere in the world, because it's miserable, it's terrible conditions, it's raining, it's cold, and it's a Tuesday night where nobody wants to be out there, but you have to. And if you can show up there, you can do it anywhere else. I changed it to Sunderland for a reason, and that should give you enough context, and you should guess this now.
Oscar Ustadi. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, it is Oscar Ustadi. He used to play for Sunderland, if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't got my facts wrong. And yeah, we shouldn't have doubted him, man. If he's performed on a cold, wet night in Sunderland, he can do it in Toronto. And boy, did he show up. A very close contender for man of the match for me. I thought he was very commanding. He was very controlling of his box. When he was asked to make the saves, he was ready, very sharp, and yeah, just came out for everything. And it felt like he didn't have much to do. But if you think about it, he was also, always there and ready to pounce on any danger that Derek Etienne or Richie Larea or anyone was throwing from the Toronto side. So for me, I think Oscar Ustari had a great debut. I don't know if we're going to see him again this season for us, but hey, it's great to have a backup keeper who can actually play really good football.
Oscar Ustari, 3 appearances for Sunderland back in, I believe, 2014. All cup appearances, no league appearances. So if I had known that, I think this would have been very easy, but I didn't. So I apologize for not getting that one right away. In great performance. I feel very comfortable with him. I feel better about him than Dos Santos at this point. I like having a professional veteran as your backup more so than a young guy you're trying to bring through, just on principle. And you're right. He's very comfortable, very professional performance. Absolutely comfortable with him. And I hope we never see him again. But ultimately, I am comfortable having him as the backup. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you know what Oscar Ustari, George Acosta, Ventura Alvarado, and Luis Argudo all have in common?
They're all from Argentina.
No. I had to think about it for a second. They are all 4 players that made one and only one appearance for Inter Miami. I will say Ustari got 90 minutes and all 3 of these got like less than 15. But that is going to be the trivia question when we talk about Oscar Ustari moving forward. He's not going to be back next year. They're not going to spend an international roster slot on a backup goalkeeper. He's not going to replace Drake Callender. But we had the extra slot. He was available. It just made sense. So we brought him in. He gets his opportunity. He performs really well. I feel very comfortable in case he does have to play again. I don't think he will, but on the basis of all of that, on the merits of all of that, I am very happy with his performance. And if you even wanted to give him the man of the match, I would have been okay with that because he did have a number of saves. And while none of them were super challenging, you got to make the routine plays. And that's what true professionals do. So.
And I think the backline sometimes looks for the goalkeeper to set everything up. And because it was his debut, I was looking to see how he performs there and how he sets the backline and controls everything. So I thought he did phenomenal. Very professional, as you said.
I will add, it's just further proof that this team hates getting Drake Callender clean sheets.
Yeah,
because the defensive performance and a clean sheet on the one night that Callender's not there, disappointing to say the least. I'm going to give the Indifference of a Cold World award.
The Indifference of a Cold World award. This award goes to Robert Taylor.
Why is that?
Because Robert Taylor has been a legend for this club, in my eyes, has performed phenomenal over the last couple of seasons. Whenever he scored upon, he scored some bangers. And then this season, because his performance has dipped a little bit, the coaching staff looked at that, saw that there are players who are playing a little bit better than him. And now he's been relegated to the point of indifference. And this indifference is reflective of the cold world that we live in. If you don't perform, you don't start.
It is the right player. It is Robert Taylor. I thought he was the best player out of the front 5 that we needed, not including Campana, but in terms of Rojas, in terms of Gressel, in terms of Negri, and in terms of the 2 midfielders that started this game, I thought he was the best. He is a guy that is best used when you have possession of the ball and you can get high up the field and he can sort of interchange. He can be good in tight spaces. He can do a number of different things. He didn't have any of that in this game. He didn't have any of that the last time he started. And so it has felt like quite some time since we got Robert Taylor in his real element. But this is a cold and different world. It's not mad at Robert Taylor. It's not angry with Robert Taylor. But sometimes you just don't get lucky. Sometimes you just are in a bad place at the wrong time. And I think that's where Robert Taylor is. Good player. And again, I thought he had the best performance out of any of those sort of wing players that we would have hoped would have been the difference maker in this team and in this game. And I thought his was really stood out compared to the rest when I rewatched the game because he had a number of nice touches and a number of nice plays that just, there was nothing else to be done about it because the rest of the team just wasn't where they needed to be and wasn't playing like they needed to play.
Yeah, I had an award for Robert Taylor. It was called the Ghost of Fort Lauderdale because he's now a ghost of his forgotten past, basically. He needed Jordi Alba on that side of the pitch to help him out. He needed to play, he needed somebody to help him play and flourish. And I agree with you. He hasn't had that over the last couple of times that he's played. I thought whenever he's come off the bench, he's looked really sharp and very, very attacking minded, and reminds you exactly how exciting he can be on that side of the pitch. Is just not falling into place for him. And I feel really sad because if we do the rankings again, he will have fallen off very far down the pecking order. Because at the start of the season, if our regular listeners remember, we did a draft and I placed Robert Taylor as number 3 in terms of his importance to this team. So it is definitely a fall from grace for him this season. He signed a new contract, so I'm hoping that's not a sign that he's going to get shipped off next season. But you never know. And the way his performances are going, it's not looking good. Hopefully he gets some chances in the playoffs and can prove his worth, because he's a really good player.
I think that was a little ambitious by you early on, but you always have to have a surprise one. Okay, exactly. What's your second award?
All right, my second award is Make a Cup of Tea for Me award.
It's Leonardo Campana.
Why is it Leo Campana?
We're getting close to going back-to-back episodes, getting all of our awards right. Yeah. It's Leo Campana because he was given the start, but he's not going to be a locked-in starter. But he might get a cup of tea in an important game. If you can fill that tea with something warm for the belly, it'll be really nice. And that's what Campana can provide.
Well, you got the player right, but the explanation was way off. So Leo Campana loves to say, make a cup of tea for me, please, because he loves to be served. And he's a player who performs and thrives in service. You give him the service, he is going to score a goal. And that's exactly what he did yesterday. You saw as soon as he had the opportunity to link up with the wide players to make those runs in where the ball was coming into the box, he was so dangerous. If you look at the goal again, he does this thing where he passes the ball over to Luis Suarez. He jukes a run, gets the defender out, and then runs into space. So he waits till there's space, creates space for himself, and then moves there. And of course, a moment of magic from Luis Suarez to absolutely find a pinpoint pass into his thigh. But he creates those opportunities for himself. All it needs is getting him that service. The more he starts games for Inter Miami and the more service you provide to Leo Campana, the more useful he's going to be in front of goal. And I don't doubt it for a second that if he played in Luis Suarez's position, assuming Luis Suarez never played for this club, I think Leo Campana's output would have been very, very high. I'm not saying it would be as good as Luis Suarez by any means, but it would be very, very high.
I've always said Campana's a 20-goal scorer if you make him the guy.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, man. He won 3 points for us, and this is not the first time this season. And he did exactly what he needed to do. And it's not even it's a nice play. Like, it wasn't just a tap in. It wasn't just sort of an easy finish.
No,
it's a nice finish. He had to collect it, whips it into the back corner, into the bottom corner. Great play. I don't know what else to say.
He started it. He started the play.
Yeah. It was all on him. There's also another play about 20 minutes earlier where he tries to roll over the ball and he just doesn't quite get it right. And so I thought there was a play there, but that was just sort of what was happening in this game where we weren't really pulling things off.
Yeah.
But I thought Campana had an okay game considering the fact that even before the goal, I thought he had an okay game considering sort of some of the performances that were going on around him. So I think he deserves an award. I was going to give him the Bloop and the Blast award because it is MLB playoff season. So for my baseball fans, you'll understand. Okay, I'm giving my last award. Sorry, the award I'm giving last is the All I See Is Pink award.
The All I See Is Pink award. Ooh. See, now there's pressure on me to get this right. I want to say you're going to give All I See Is Pink, which would symbolize that this is a player who bleeds into Miami. He only sees pink because he is a diehard into Miami through and through. Is it Franco Negri or Serhiy Kryvstov? Oh, damn it. Is it Toto Aviles? Ah, it's Toto Aviles. There you go. We were so close, man. We were so close to a full sweep.
You know, if all you see is pink, you know what color you can't see?
Yellow.
Yellow.
That was on my mind. That was on my mind as well.
I thought all three of the back three had a good game. I thought Kryvstov was good. I thought Noah Allen was man of the match. I thought Scotty was really, really good. And I think Aviles was good too. And he didn't get a yellow card. And I feel like he deserved an award for that. Because all he sees is pink.
He deserves 2 awards for that. Yeah. No, I thought he was fine. I thought he got overshadowed by Noah Allen. Otherwise, he would have had a decent performance. There was this one moment where he got absolutely rinsed by Derek Etienne Jr., which is slightly embarrassing to watch, but no harm done, no foul. He was okay. He was good. I thought he played well. And the backline was solid enough to the point that, yes, Toronto was creating some chances, but they weren't any clear-cut chances, and you felt in control throughout the game. It didn't feel like we were being bombarded by chances one after the other. And credit to the backline for that. I thought they passed among themselves a bit too much, and sometimes that's where you miss Sergio Busquets in that backline to be able to create those line-breaking passes and to create more forward momentum. But overall, I thought all three performed very well. And Toto Aviles, credit to you, man. I know you saw that one moment where you wanted to push the player in front of you and get that yellow card, and you resisted. You could physically see him thinking, I can't do this again. And he just pulls himself back from doing it. So good on you. This is an improvement. Now build on from this. You know what? Against New England, go get a yellow card because it's going to get wiped out anyways. So you deserve this award.
Yeah, no, he definitely had a moment where he was like, his brain was telling him, go foul this dude and get this yellow card. And then his heart was like, I don't want to get in trouble again. And so he pulled off. I consider giving an award to Busquets because I thought when he came in,
game changed.
Man, the class, the difference in that midfield was just so stark and
oozing class.
If obviously gotten a yellow card, I would have given one to Busquets because, again, you know, we know Messi's great, but Busquets in that midfield, man, is something to watch. He can just orchestrate things so well. We win that game 4-0 if he starts. Even with everyone else being, you know, the same starting 11. So any other performances you wanted to talk about? I mean, we went through all of my awards. Did you have any leftovers? Do you want to talk about?
No, that was
Messi
all my awards as well.
Suarez?
Julian Gressel, maybe. Again, not great. Serhiy Kryvstov, I thought was stable, solid, played well. Franco Negri, I thought was fine. Had a difficult outing, by the way. He had a very difficult outing against some good players on that side of the pitch, and he was okay. Defensively did his work. Nothing great going forward. And I thought in this system, he needed to be that forward player, but it's fine. No issues there. Robert Taylor, we got through. And yeah, we covered most of them. I thought that was a fine game.
Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier, so I'll just explain why. Richie Laray and Shane O'Neill on that right side for Toronto against our left side, I thought had a really good defensive game. And so part of the reason why I wanted to give Robert Taylor an award was because I thought he was going up against the better side of their defense and still had what I thought was the most impressive performance from that sort of wing play. Should we talk about what's coming up? I mean, it feels like it is a complete dead period for Inter Miami for the next 10 days. It is the international break. We will get New England, but that game doesn't really have a ton of pressure. No seeding implications. I mean, every other team in the MLS, for the most part, is going to be playing for something, or they're so bad that they've lost the right to play for something. And then there's just Inter Miami that's chilling at the top thinking, this is easy. We'll just tune up. Everyone, you know, go have a kick and have fun. And then it will get serious after that. But that's 3 weeks away before our first playoff game. So how are we feeling about Inter Miami? Do we have any conversations that we feel we should have now?
The only one to have is the points record, and I feel like that's still 2 weeks away, so I'm sure we're going to talk about it closer to date. But I think this is the best way to end the regular season. You don't want to be too emotionally charged and on an emotional high on the last day of the MLS regular season, where you're, still thinking, are you going to win the league? Are you getting into the playoffs? Because that can take a toll on you. I'm glad we got that Columbus game out of the way before the next two games against Toronto and New England, because you could sense that there was a drain of energy yesterday against Toronto. Now we can just relax for a little bit, calm down, refocus, and make sure we're ready for the playoffs, because that's the most important run that we're going to go on. And I know on this podcast we love to do a preview of the games that we're going to see, but there's nothing more important than the playoffs upcoming now. So I'm glad the players get a rest, both mentally and physically, and us as well, man. I think we've covered a fair few games over the last couple of the last month, and it'll be nice to just chill, relax, and just talk about everything around Inter Miami rather than the games and what's going to happen in the games and how we're feeling emotionally about this team, because the playoffs are going to be important.
It's really nice to go into an international break feeling good instead of feeling bad.
Exactly.
Because then it's just all calm and relaxed. If you feel bad, it's stressful and you got to think about how to fix it and what players need to be switched in and switched out. Instead, it's just very nice and calming. Guys, I see a comment from Circus Fund. Do we know who we're going to play yet in the playoffs? Inter Miami will not know who they're going to play in the playoffs until a few days before. As the number one seed, they will play the winner of the 8-9 game. As we speak, the 8 and 9 seed are DC United and Montreal. Both Philadelphia and Atlanta are still alive for that. They are 3 points behind with one game to play. So it would take, wins and losses by various teams for it to not be DC and Montreal, who look like they both need a draw to go through. But we won't know exactly who we're playing until they have their one-off game. So Inter Miami won't know exactly who we're playing for quite some time. I will just say a lot of the rest of the Eastern Conference is sort of set. Columbus is going to be the 2 seed. Cincinnati is going to be the 3 seed. Orlando City and NYCFC could still battle for that 4-5, but it's probably going to be them, one of those two who we play in the second round. Either way, it's going to be at home, and then I would expect to see Columbus or Cincinnati in the conference final if we get there, and all of that will be at home. So you should feel good about that. But anyways, guys, we will be back on Wednesday. We'll do a midweek episode. We'll do a more forward, looking episode. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Club World Cup and how Inter Miami might stack up. So unless there's any big breaking news that we need to dedicate a podcast to, that's the plan. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you for being a part of this. Thanks for being in the chat. And I hope you guys enjoy your week, and we will see you guys next time. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.